Hey everybody, Hank Linderman here. You'll notice things look a little differently. My computer took this moment to decide it didn't want to cooperate. Everything was going great for the hours I took to prepare today, but that's sometimes the way it goes. Hi Billy, I'm glad you're here. Of course, I'm your Democratic nominee for Congress here in Kentucky's 2nd District. I'm in Grayson County, and we've got 21 counties. I don't have a primary, so I'm very fortunate. And hi, Mark. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, and it really does help us. Hi, Dennis. How are you? Glad you've made it. This will be a little bit different today, like I say, because I don't have all my pieces. I'm not able to see all my pieces that I was going to show you, but that's okay. I'll be able to talk to you directly. Hey, Marky. Hi, Barbara. How are you? So we're going to talk about a couple of things. I think one of the first things we should talk about is here in Kentucky we've got a Democratic governor, and he's hi Craig, how are you? We have a Democratic governor named Andy Beshear, and Andy Beshear is the son of another governor, Steve Beshear, and Steve Beshear was one of the ones who was instrumental in a state that's largely Republican. Hi Susie, how are you? Hi Larry. Boy, it's so great to have so many of you here. Hi Mark. Andy Beshear announced this week that he would be arranging for free medical care for African Americans in Kentucky. Hi, Mark. And that he'd be doing this because African Americans are suffering at something like double the rate of the rest of the state of Kentucky. And this is a wonderful thing. I think it's a great idea. And it might, might be kind of a sneaky way. Hi Mary, how are you? It might be kind of a sneaky way to convince the rest of us that maybe Medicare for all wouldn't be such a bad thing, to modernize our healthcare system and get rid of the corruption and get rid of the waste and just the many levels that we pay too much money, we don't get very good results. So I think that's fascinating that Governor Beshear is doing that, and I hope that that idea spreads beyond just the state of Kentucky. And by the way, when you're helping a community that's more or less at the bottom of the ladder, poor folks, for example, when you help poor people, people that are at the bottom of the ladder, that's something that's going to benefit the country. I call it trickle up. We've all heard about trickle down for years. That trickle down doesn't really work, but trickle up will work. Hi John, how are you? And the reason is that when you do what you can, when you water the roots of the tree at the bottom of our socioeconomic ladder, these are folks that must spend the money, so they will. I'm also, the things I was going to talk about today were two things, and I'll have to kind of sneak a peek over here to look at them. But one of them is that, you know, the Confederate flag has been such a powerful symbol here in the South especially, but it spreads throughout much of organized society, and there's a organization that you see the Confederate flag in quite a bit, and there's never been a lot of objection to it. It's kind of part of the way they present things, and that's in NASCAR. So NASCAR races are a big part of what America is into. Racing is a cool thing. I enjoy watching racing. But the Confederate flag is kind of everywhere, and there is we have an African-American driver whose last name is Wallace, who's the only, I believe, African-American race driver in NASCAR, and he's recently been wearing a black T-shirt with the words "I can't breathe." He was at last Sunday's race, and when he got asked about it, his comments on race. His comment was, "My next step would be to get rid of all Confederate flags. There should be no individual that's uncomfortable showing up to our events to have a good time with their family, that feels some type of way about something that they've seen, an object they've seen flying," Wallace told CNN. "No one should feel uncomfortable when they come to a NASCAR race." So it starts with Confederate flags. Let's get them out of here. They have no place. We have no place for them. Now, not everyone agrees, and by the way, this is a story on the Associated Press, so if you want to look it up, you can check up NASCAR. Check out NASCAR and the Confederate flag. NASCAR historian Dan Pierce says, now it's kind of a middle finger using the flag, and that's certainly the way it gets used. I've seen it get used that way all the time. Hi, Henry. How are you? But we're also going through a period of time when, because of the widespread acceptance of Black Lives Matter and the goal of fairness for African Americans, finally, after 400 years of mistreatment, we're seeing things like Confederate monuments are getting taken down. The Confederate monument for General Lee, I think, is being moved out of Virginia. We've got a monument to General Castleman in Louisville that was just removed. Now, General Castleman did some good things. He's a little bit of a confusing character. It can be seen that way. But we're going through this process of taking down these flags, and it's a very touchy subject for some. And I've heard both sides of the argument, but I think we're at a moment where it's time to put them in museums and kind of take them out of the public square. Race car driver Wallace is going to make another statement on Wednesday when NASCAR returns to Martinsville Speedway in Virginia. He's driving a hashtag Black Lives Matter paint scheme for the Richard Petty Motorsports number 43 Chevrolet. Barbara says they're working on the Lee Monument. There's a lawsuit about it, which doesn't surprise me, of course. It takes time. Two-time Daytona 500 champion Denny Hamlin said he would support NASCAR taking a hard line on the Confederate flag. Quote, NASCAR is going to continue to make changes, and I'm sure they'll look at what flags they want to fly in the infield. If you look all over the haulers each and every weekend, they've got American flags flown all over the top of them. That's what we salute when we do the national anthem, and that's the way it should be. Ryan Blaney, who's tight with Wallace, says he joined some of the peaceful protests in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also called for the end of the Confederate flag, I'm assuming within NASCAR. Bring your 50 stars flag. I had an unusual experience in 2018. I went to the NAACP dinner in Bowling Green, which was held on the Western Kentucky campus in a beautiful reception room. The meal was fantastic, and I sat at a table with a gentleman who was a retired professor of history from Western, and he was African American. And I said, I got to ask you about this, because I've been trying to explain Kentucky to other people, and I have trouble explaining some of what Kentucky is about. And I said, what I keep coming up with is that we haven't really settled the Civil War here. And he looked at me and said, what we say in the history department is that Kentucky joined the Confederacy after the war. And that was a difficult statement to swallow, but it certainly seems to be true. And hi, John Alma, how are you? So that was a very difficult thing to consider, and it really is true. We have not settled the Civil War in so many ways. And I think that putting the Confederate flag into museums, putting the statues into museums as historical objects, but getting them out of the public square is a tiny way that we can start. And we have so much more to do in that regard. Now let's talk about defunding the police. This is a very, very tricky subject. And I think defund, besides being easy to, say out loud when you're at a protest, defund the police. Hi, John Alma. Hi, Debbie. It's one of those tricky things where, remember when Black Lives Matter first came out, a lot of us, and I have to admit me included, kind of went, well, yeah, but all lives matter, and if we work for equality for all lives, that should work. But that's not really the point. You have to have a very simplified message. You get about 5 syllables to make your point these days in America. And Black Lives Matter, 4 syllables. It just gets under the wire. Defund the police. Now that's 5. Hi, John. How are you? If we go for a literal interpretation of defund the police, and maybe there are some people who want to actually shut the police department down, not have any police at all, but I worry there's a danger there. First of all, there are people who want to do other people harm, and so we do need to have some sort of public safety. Hi, Jane. Hi, Greg. Hi, Rich. we do need to have some sort of public safety structure in our society. Now, the police are under a lot of fire, and there's going to be a lot of discussion back and forth about this. And I saw an interesting article from a police officer who feels like, America, you're going to get what you want, and the police feel embattled. I don't know if you saw, Minneapolis has decided to end their, or restructure, they're shutting down their police department, and they're going to redo it. Now, the interesting thing is that sounds like a terrible idea. Emergency services, hi Mark Bookin, glad you're here. Emergency services is maybe not a bad way to call this, but there is an example of a city that shut down their police department and completely reorganized it, and that city is Camden, New Jersey. And they did it 7 years ago. And 7 years ago, their crime rate was among the worst in the United States. Within 9 square miles and among 75,000 residents, there were over 170 open-air drug markets reported in 2013. Violent crime abounded. Police corruption was at the core. Lawsuits filed against the department uncovered that officers routinely planted evidence on suspects, fabricated reports, and committed perjury. We're talking about Camden, the ex-Camden Police Department back in 2013. After all the corruption was exposed, courts overturned the convictions of 88 people. So in 2012, officials voted to completely disband the department, saying it was beyond reform. And in 2013, the Camden County Police Department officially began its tenure. No other city of Camden's size has ever done anything quite like this. And in those 7 years, violent crime has dropped 42%. The crime rate has dropped from 79 per 1,000 to 44 per 1,000. And they are focusing more on recruiting and training within the communities that are being policed. The Camden County officers, apparently, when they get hired to the job, they go out for a walk in the neighborhood they'll be policing, and they knock on doors and they meet neighbors. They go door to door and they talk to the neighbors, and they find out what the neighbors' concerns are. And I think that's really wonderful. Now here's one of the quotes that's important. Many of the city's problems remain unsolved, and these are going to require more work than a shift in law enforcement can provide on its own. Pardon me. It's not the Rona. I'm just dry. In fact, I'm going to open my little fizzy water. We can't police our way out of social issues, unemployment, disproportionate health issues, economic challenges. These are things that drive crime. We can't police our way out of this. But we can have police that are more responsive and more connected to the communities that they work in. And so I think it's a fascinating, yes, exactly, Mary, that's what we were just saying. Camden does have a long way to go. And I used to live near Camden. I lived in Haddonfield, New Jersey, which was maybe 30 minutes, 20 minutes away from Camden. And I believe I started driving there. Got to think this through. No, I wasn't quite driving, but I had friends who could drive. And I used to go to Camden because I could race slot cars. I was way into slot cars when I was a kid. And Camden was very, very dangerous back then. I was kind of on the outskirts of it. So no question, we have lots of other work to do. And I think most of that comes down to inequality. If we're not willing to deal with social and economic inequality in this country, these problems are going to plague us for quite some time. Now, the focus right now is on Black Lives Matter, and it should be, and it should remain there. We also have inequality, social and economic, but primarily economic, in rural America. Rural America has been let go, and neither party has really taken care of rural America the same way they haven't really taken care of urban America. And that's why I've come up with this thing that I'm going to hold up a piece of paper. It's even got some spaghetti sauce stains on it, so sorry about that. I've come up with this thing called the Contract for Rural and Working America, and I have a feeling it's backwards when you all see it. So that's not going to help, is it? Anyway, I'll read you some of the items from it, because we're going to be working on this and presenting it publicly very, very soon. And we're going to be looking for other politicians to sign on to it, and hopefully we'll do a way that you all can sign on to it. The first piece is restoring health care in rural America. Second is education and child care. Third is support for small subsistence and family farms. Fourth is rebuilding America's infrastructure and domestic supply chain. Fourth is a living wage. Fifth is support for workers in declining industries. Sixth is renewable energy, water, wind, and solar. 7 is rural broadband. 8 is abuse prevention, rehabilitation, and support. 9 is legalization of cannabis, and 10 is the Secretary of Rural Affairs. So we do have lots of work, and I'm actually missing one of the pieces because there's actually 11 pieces, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. Please, it makes a huge difference for you to share, and it's going to become more and more important that we spread this message as far as possible. We're looking to get people interested in making real changes in the United States, real changes that our country needs. And we haven't even begun discussing the damage we have done, humanity has done to the climate, to the point where life for humans is under threat. And we're going to have to deal with all of these things. And it's going to mean finding ways to get people who will be willing to do some rebalancing on the contract between corporations and people. You know, someone said to me in the 2nd District, you know, it just seems like corporations have so much more power than people. And it's really true. I'm not going to complain about corporations. They provide our employment. I buy things from corporations. I've worked for corporations. That's not the problem. But things are out of balance. And working people, especially in urban America and in rural America, have been taken advantage of. They're not being paid nearly enough. We could double the wages of working people, and it may not be enough, especially for those who are at the bottom. $7.25 for a minimum wage is not nearly enough. That's just barely over $15,000 a year. How on earth can someone survive on $15,000 a year? It's just not possible. And that's working 40 hours a week. In fact, I think that I've seen a stat that says it takes more weeks than there are in a year to break even in America. And this is not right. This is not America. You know, one of our American beliefs is that, and I believe it's in the Declaration, with liberty and justice for all. We really must continue our work for equality, social equality, and economic equality, and there's a lot to do. All of our problems in the United States, I believe, and even in the world, are deeply rooted in inequality. So that's why I'm running for Congress. That's why I'm asking for your help. That's why I'm asking for your vote. And that's why I'm doing this every day. It's so important to have your help. It makes it easier for me to do this, so I really appreciate it. And those of you that have been contributing, it's wonderful. Today, because I didn't have the computer working, the computer decided to not cooperate. You'll have to go to hank4ky.com. That's Hank, number 4, ky.com. And there's places to contribute there. But there are other ways to contribute, and a big one is to share these little broadcasts. So I appreciate you all being here. Thank you all for sharing, for contributing, for commenting. We've got a lot to do, and we've only got 20 more weeks before November. So time's a-wasting. Alrighty. Yes, Mary says it's in the Pledge of Allegiance, with liberty and justice for all. What would be wrong with that? Why shouldn't we all, as Americans, want liberty and justice for all? Ultimately, I think we all do. All right. Take care of yourselves. I will see you tomorrow. I hope you know I love you. And keep the faith, all right? Take care, everybody.